Just give it a couple minutes while people are joining.
Good morning.
Again.
Hi. Matt, Nick, are you still in Grand Junction?
Hey Dan, yeah, I'm still here. Headed back across the street as soon as we're done here
Yeah,
to be just in time for public comment.
yeah, totally. Yeah, I left last night. My daughter's birthday was yesterday, so I want to make it home to not miss that. But I've been listening in online. So
Yeah, I heard it was her birthday. That's
yeah,
well worth going home for.
yeah, especially her. She's 12 now, but I feel like she's going on, I don't know, 17 or something like that. So she wanted a big party and friends over and stuff. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, they grow up really fast, especially when they hit that age.
Yeah. So who has a record for snow amounts from the storm? Like I'm in Breckenridge and like normally I win, right? Because I live close to 10,000 feet, but storm really didn't pan out much where I live. Estes Park looked like it was huge, like over 20 inches.
Yeah, Kate told me that I think she got 27 in her backyard.
Wow.
Wow.
She probably won.
Yeah, I think anybody around Estes Park was the winner.
Yeah.
All right, I think we have critical mass, so we can kick off today's meeting of the Drought Task Force. Thank you all for being here. As a reminder, on Tuesday, March 16th, Governor Polis announced the activation of Phase 2 of the State Drought Response Plan and formally initiated the Drought Task Force with a mandate to meet within 30 days. The first Drought Task Force meeting occurred on April 10th. Thank you all for attending. And this is the Drought Task Force's second meeting and fulfills the Drought Task Force's decision to convene mid-May. My name is Kat Weissmiller. I am the section chief for water supply planning at the Colorado Water Conservation Board, and my section helps to plan and respond when drought conditions escalate. Next slide, please. I'm just going to walk us quickly through the agenda for today. We're going to have a drought conditions update from the state climatologist, Russ Schumacher, along with a brief wildfire outlook from Paul Duarte from the Division of Fire Prevention and Control. Thank you guys both for being here today. And then we'll have some time for agency report outs after that. And then we'll have a discussion about the ad hoc work groups that have been activated. We'll provide some background on the ad hoc work groups so that we all have a better understanding of how they will operate, and we'll provide some information about the work that's been done for each group since our last meeting. So we look forward to discussing how to move each of them forward with you all. And then finally, we'll wrap up with some next steps and talk through what's coming after that. I do want to note that we set aside time in the agenda for public comment, but we did not receive any submissions ahead of this meeting. The CWCB did receive a written public comment in the interim between meetings, which we responded to, letting them know that the input had been received and shared with the Drought Task Force via internal channels. And due to the nature of the comment, the message was also routed to the Energy and Carbon Management Commission. So I just wanted to pass along that information for all of you. And with that, I think we're going to take it to the next slide. As I said, we have two guests here today to present some relevant updates on drought conditions and wildfire outlooks ahead. And to start us off, we have the state's climatologist, Russ Schumacher, to give an update on the latest drought and water supply conditions. So I'll turn it over to you, Russ.
Okay, good deal. Thanks, Kat. Thanks, everybody, for having me. Yeah, you can go ahead to the next slide. And maybe if it's possible to just kind of flip back and forth between this one and the next one a few times, because this is what the drought monitor looked like a month ago. And then the next one is the map that just came out this morning. And so if you flip back and forth a little bit there, and we see the changes since the last, it comes through okay on the Zoom. You can see the changes since the last Drought Task Force meeting about a month ago. What we've seen over that time period was, at least up until the last couple of days, conditions getting quite a bit worse on the eastern plains and some modest improvements on the western slope after some cooler and wetter conditions in recent weeks there. So this is what the current drought monitor map looks like. If we compare some of the metrics there on the right, last week we had 100% of the state in drought D1 or worse. That reduced a little bit with some parts of like El Paso and Pueblo, Lincoln counties going back into D0 after a good snowstorm last week. The important thing to note here is that the storm we just had the last couple days, almost all of that precipitation occurred after the data cutoff for this week's map, which is early Tuesday morning. And so that'll all get considered for next week's map. I would imagine there will probably be some places that see improvements on the map when the map comes out next week as a result of the beneficial precipitation the last couple of days. And I'll show some of those numbers in a little bit. Okay, next slide. So this is the snowpack time series that we all probably pay a lot of attention to in the water space for the full state of Colorado. And so there's maybe a small bit of good news there is that, you see this year's trace in the black, and it has now emerged above the record low for today for the last couple of days. So that's, I guess, cause for some very minor celebration, but it is, of course, still way below average. And the peak, which is a much more important metric back in March and April, was extremely low, the lowest that we've ever had. And so, again, it's good news that we're not in record low territory anymore. We're at 26% of median as opposed to 18 or 20 that we were at a week or so ago. But still, it's, on the whole, it's not good news when we look at this graph. Next slide. And so this goes back, I showed this slide at the last meeting. This was April 1st snowpack from the snow courses. So where we can look at the even longer record going back to some of those bad years like 1977, 1981. As of April 1st to 2026, this year was so far below even those really bad years historically. You go to the next slide is what this looked like for the May 1st graphic, and 2026 is still the lowest on record at that time compared to the long-term history at these 35 stations. The margin isn't quite as big, mostly just because 2012 was such a bad year also and was kind of catching up on the low end there. So, if we had the data like this for today, maybe 2026 would be a little bit above 2012. But again, still very bad in the big picture historically. Next slide. So this sums up the water year through the end of April. So again, doesn't include the good precipitation from the last few days. On the left is the historical rank of temperature for the first 7 months of the water year. So comparing this October through April with all other October through April periods going back to the late 1800s. And we see that essentially the entire state is the warmest on record over that time period, and averaged over the state, it's the warmest on record by a large margin, continues to be. April was warmer than average, but not nearly as extreme as March was. But we can see that trend continues, that this is the warmest water year on record by a big margin. On the right is the rank of precipitation from this October through April compared to all other October through April periods. We see that some pockets like in the northeastern plains and in southern Colorado were the driest first 7 months of the water year on record. A lot of other places in the top 10 driest. it's maybe a little bit, I mean, it's not misleading, but like southwestern Colorado doesn't actually look that bad on this map. And a lot of that comes from that big rain event back in October. More recently, conditions obviously have not been as good. Although that part of the state did have had a pretty decent April. Okay, next slide. I'm sure many of you saw the forecast come out from CBRFC yesterday. Some pretty startling numbers. This is their May 1st forecast for all of the various rivers in the Colorado River Basin. The top line there is the really startling one for inflows to Lake Powell. Only 13% of average in the forecast, and that would be the driest, the lowest on record into Powell for the April through July period. You look at some of the other rivers in Colorado that end up feeding into the Colorado River, so they're all somewhere between first and fourth lowest in this outlook. And 25 to 40% of average flows there. So those are pretty bleak numbers that are still there. This wouldn't account specifically for the recent snowstorm, but west of the divide, as Dan mentioned, it was not as big of an event as it was along the Front Range and eastern Colorado. So yeah, we have some reasonably good news lately, but these numbers are still really they're really bad. Next slide. And so here's the precipitation for May so far through yesterday morning. Like southeastern Colorado got some more precipitation yesterday, so these numbers will be a little bit higher there. So this looks pretty good. The Northern Front Range, really, this was a really much needed storm for the Northern Front Range. You can see some of those spots in the purple are more than 2 inches of precipitation over the last week. So again, up in Estes Park and the foothills of Larimer and Boulder counties, over 2 inches of precipitation, 2 feet of snow from that storm the last couple of days, and a lot of observations of 1 inch or more of precipitation in those areas. So really beneficial storm for the Northern Front Range. Very beneficial storm for most of the Eastern Plains that have really been drying out. So a lot of 1/2 inch to 1 inch precipitation totals there that look good. And then you go west of the divide, and there's been precipitation, but not nearly as notable there. So some okay numbers in the northern and central mountains. This storm didn't really bring much precipitation at all to the southern mountains or to southwestern Colorado. So next slide. And the having this big storm the last couple days in much of the state maybe gets our hopes up for the miracle May, but it doesn't unfortunately look like that is what is going to come about. We're going to head right back into a warm and dry pattern for the next 7 to 10 days at least. We'll be back. This map shows the departure from average temperature for next Monday, and it's back to 10 to 15 degrees above average across the state with close to record highs in a lot of places. So we're headed right back into warm. And the next slide shows the outlook for precipitation over the next 15 days. Basically, the left panel there is all brown, meaning that almost all of the weather forecast models are showing almost 100% probability of the next 15 days being below average precipitation, with the one possible exception being down in parts of the southern mountains. So we're unfortunately not headed to having repeat snowstorms over May here that will help. So I think it's the precipitation the last few days has been great. It'll be a boost to the soil moisture and the remaining snowpack, and maybe a little bit of bump in stream flow, but the snow is not going to stick around all that long in most places. And we're not going to, unfortunately, go into a cooler and wetter pattern, at least not in the next couple of weeks. Next slide. And then this looks out further. The dot on the map or the pin there is for Denver. For some reason, they don't have the state. They took the state boundaries off of this map, which it makes it a little bit harder to navigate. But the little pin is at Denver. So this is the summer outlook, June, July, August for precipitation. What you can see is most of Colorado is in the equal chances area. Unclear whether it'll be wetter or drier than normal, but there is a pretty strong tilt towards warmer than average over that period. And then you go to the next one, jumps 1 month ahead. This is the core monsoon season, July, August, September. And now this does have a signal for a wetter than average monsoon season, especially in southern and western Colorado. Eastern Plains a little bit less clear because as you see a strong signal for drier than average conditions over the Great Plains. And, we'll have to see where that dividing line ends up happening as far as Eastern Colorado goes. But at least as some long-term optimism continues for the monsoon season, especially in Western Colorado. Next slide, I think, is just the takeaways. So the water year through April has been by far the warmest on record. You've heard me say that every month at the various meetings. So that continues in the top 10 driest for Colorado for the first 7 months of the water year. Mountain snowpack as of May 1st was still record low. It's slightly improved the last few days with these recent storms, which certainly we're very happy to take that moisture, but they don't come anywhere close to making up the huge deficits that we've had. And so the river flows are going to be extremely low into the summer. And so those drought impacts are going to be there as a result of the poor snowpack and those low flows. Looking out further, I didn't really talk much about El Nino here, but maybe by next fall or next winter, plus the active monsoon, I think gives us some reason for optimism that it's not going to be a multi-year punishing drought, that there will be some improvement that happens in the months to come, but there's going to be plenty of impacts before we get to that point. So I think last slide just has my contact info if anybody needs to get in touch. And no, maybe it's not there. I don't know. Does it appear if you click ahead one more? No, I guess not. Well, you all know how to find me. I'm not that hard to find. So feel free to get in touch if you have any questions or concerns. And be happy to take questions if there's time.
Thanks, Russ. Are there any questions?
I have a question, Kat. Thanks, Russ. I thought maybe you intentionally took your contact information off of that slide because of all the bad news that you're bringing us. As I've talked with you a little bit about, I'm a little concerned that if we get precipitation that will drop off the drought monitor, because the disaster declarations depend a lot on the signals from the drought monitor. Could that happen, or because snowpack is so low, is that taken into consideration? Like you said, stream flows won't be there, but annual average precipitation may be at normal levels for the particular counties.
Yep, and this is a really important question, and just something that I think all of us doing the drought monitoring process are struggling with in these kinds of situations, because exactly a lot of eastern Colorado now is, after this storm, the precipitation for the water year, for example, is pretty close to average, but it's been super warm, clearly. So there's that's been stressing things out. And then the water supply in the rivers, it doesn't so much come from how much precipitation you get locally. It's coming from the mountains and the snowpack. And the U.S. Drought Monitor map is not, it's just kind of a not really well equipped for this situation, because I mean, certainly as the stream flow gets lower in the rivers as we go into the summer, assuming that's what happens, that will certainly be something that gets taken into account on the Eastern Plains, for example. But it's a difficult thing, this like drought at a distance, where it's maybe D4 up in the mountains because the snowpack is so low, on the plains, the precipitation doesn't look so bad. How do we reflect that on one map is just going to continue to be a challenge. And so I think, the one thing I'll emphasize, because we've, as you sort of joked about, we've been getting plenty of these impact reports. Hopefully this rain at least helps a little bit in the near term. But please, for the folks you work with, continue to send along those impacts reports, either whether it's, to me or our office, or like through Kokoraz or through the Seymour venue from the Drought Mitigation Center. Like those are really valuable, because, at the first level, the drought monitor is data driven. That's the top line thing. But if people are seeing impacts on the ground that are not aligned with the data, which sometimes that's what happens, like that is really important information to hear about, and we can pass that along to the drought monitor authors.
That's good to know. Thanks, Russ. Just from the irrigated farmer standpoint, that's what's flowing in the river is going to be critical at the time. And then even from aquatic life perspective, that there could be impacts there. So I appreciate that. Second question.
And reservoir levels down, Pueblo or John Martin, or, those kinds of places as well.
Yeah. The second question is kind of wildfire related, and it looks like we're going to have that presentation later on wildfire. But is there any indication of what our thunderstorms could look like this summer? Because, lightning creates such a problem for wildfires.
Yeah. I mean, an active monsoon season means more thunderstorms, which on the good side means more rain, but also means more lightning. Might also mean more hail. So that, those are the trade-offs that unfortunately come with that. I mean, if it's an active monsoon, and we will be, I don't want to kind of speak too much about the wildfire situation, because we've got the real expert coming up on that. But it's, wetter monsoon season, it does come with more lightning, but also if you have the cloudier days and higher humidity, that probably is better. That's a good thing. But we'll have to see. That's still a ways off to get into that level of detail. But it's an important thing to keep tabs on.
Great. Thanks, Russ.
And I see, Tracy, you have your hand up.
Thanks, Kat. Yeah, I just wanted to add to Robert's really first question to say that the stream flow forecasts, not just, actual stream flows, are predicted to be very low around the state, on the order of 30% of normal, kind of depending on your location. So to the extent that that can inform what's shown on the drought monitor, Russ, maybe your team wants to pass that along, if that's relevant.
Yeah, no, thanks. And I think the one important thing to keep in mind is the drought monitor is not a forecast. It's based on current conditions. And so generally this has actually been something we've had some back and forth with the drought monitor authors about, is the fact that the snowpack is so low pretty much guarantees that the stream flows are going to be low later on, but they're not. Well, they are getting low now, but as of a month ago, they were not low yet. So that it's going to be something we'll want to keep a close eye on, to not get too far behind the curve on what those conditions look like, because we know that in a lot of places, unless the weather patterns really change, that those stream flows are going to get really low, and there's some spots where it's already showing up, like I think I had it as a backup slide in there in case but it's probably not in the presentation here. But if you look at like the White River at Meeker, is like that hydrograph is a yikes, because it's like already peaked a month ago and is already like way below any other year at this time. And there's a few other of those rivers on the west slope, like the Eagle River looks kind of like that too. So those are pretty concerning. And we know there's, again, unless we get a ton of snow coming up, there's not more water upstream to improve that situation.
Yeah, and I guess I bring it up because maybe I'm just reiterating the importance of some of those emergency declarations to unlock programs, especially for our ag producers. resources that might be available to them. So I'm hopeful that those declarations don't rely solely on the drought monitor, but hopefully also other indicators of the real poor conditions for our irrigators this year.
Yeah, no, thanks, Tracy. And that's important. And this is kind of a long running issue with connected to the US Drought Monitor, is it was never designed to be a map that determines where disaster declarations or relief availability is determined by, but it has become that for better or worse. And so, these are important things that have to be considered.
Thanks. And Matt, I see you have your hand up too.
Yeah, just real quick question for you, Russ. I noticed on the slide, the question is about the slide on the inflows to Powell. Did that go all the way back to the initial fill, Powell?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, probably not. That's maybe that, and CBRSC I don't think existed going back that far. So it's like the lowest forecast they've ever made, which probably goes back to like the early 90s or something like that.
Okay, thanks. I was just curious how far back that went.
All right, I don't see any other hands raised for questions. So thank you very much, Russ, for providing all this information.
Yeah, happy to do so, and feel, as others just pass along stuff you're seeing is super helpful for us too.
Will do. Next up, we have Paul Duarte from the Division of Fire Prevention and Control to give us a really brief update on the wildfire outlooks for the rest of spring and into summer.
Thanks, Kat. And I'd also like to thank Russ, because normally I am the doom and gloom presentation every time. So having you go before me is kind of refreshing in a very sick kind of way. So thank you. I hit a bunch of my slides because I knew Russ and I would be talking about some of the very exact same things when it came to the weather, the drought, and all those kinds of things. So I'm going to be a little bit more specific and actually really short, and happy to answer questions. But we can go to the next slide. This, you're all aware, last year was a fairly busy season for us. Most of our stuff was focused up in the Northwest, but each one of those dots was a dot of a wildland fire in Colorado last year. And so we're usually right around that 3,000 to 4,000 fires that are in the system every year. And we expect to be right about the same this year, if not more. So next slide, please. What I wanted to mainly show was kind of the outlook, considering what we've had up to this point of the year and all that kind of stuff. So you can see as you go around there, we got May, June, and July. Fire is going to be a problem. Fire is always a problem somewhere in the US, and it just depends where we fit in that mix. And so right now, when you're looking at May, it's predicting a fairly normal for us right now. Normal is still, like I said, 4,000 fires all summer. So we'll be looking right around the, probably 20 to 25 fires that have potential to do something really bad for sure. As we move into June, that whole sliding over to the west slope really starts to happen, because that's where we start to, it finally starts drying out. Anything that's left will start to dry out, and we'll start moving that direction, and that continues into July. So we are truly expecting to see our normal pattern. It's just been elevated already. Up to this point, we already had about 170 fires this year. And so those have been fairly large fires. I think some of the things that are important to recognize, go ahead and you can go to the next one. We've been really pushing high levels of 90th and 97th percentile in our world, meaning that those are really bad days. And those are bad days because they're hot, they're dry, they're windy. And so having those high levels this early in the year is not normal. I mean, it's definitely an elevated season. We do have concerns. We appreciate the moisture that we just got, but I think there's a couple things that are really important to recognize here is not only did we pick up some moisture, but the thing that concerns me the most, so the moisture is going to help us for the next 7 to 10 days for sure. But we also had some unexpected freezing taking place post storm. And so there were places that were starting to bud out and green up, that there is a potential that we now have some frost kill in things that were starting to be less prone to fire. And so we'll see what, after today and the next few days, how much of that frost kill actually took place. And we could actually be in worse shape after the moisture than we were before the moisture. And so that's always fun to talk about too. You can go to the next slide. This is just another example. This one's on the western slope where we're still actually hitting some of those 90th and 97th percentiles with some of the things that we look out there. Again, hot, dry, windy types of things that are just really giving that high indicator that we are not only getting worse, but we've been bad up to this point. Next slide. And so this was one of the ones that Russ had, but for firefighters, sometimes we have to put pictures next to each other to be able to see the difference. So from last year to this year, exact same month, this is what the drought index looks like for us. And so that's, we do expect to see some improvement in that a little bit, but I mean, it's kind of like, you know, we're going from worst to second worst kind of stuff in a lot of situations. So next slide, please. This was also part of it, but here's the one thing I want to put on your radar, because I think it's important. As we start seeing less water out in the hills, out in the places, in reservoirs, in ponds, that definitely not only has an impact on fire intensity and fire severity. We can see, you know, fires on the top where they're burning bigger flames, so we have higher intensity, moving faster. But with the soil moistures being lower, concern should also be for the severity and how much deeper that heat gets into the soil, and could have longer term effects on some of the things that happen out there. So those are two things that are super important. But the other thing is availability of water for us to fight fire, for helicopters to dip, and for us to be able to be, you know, we might have multiple small areas that we can go grab water, where those are, we've already seen a lot of them dried up this year or never replenished over the winter. So we are concerned about that, and we know that there's going to be competition for those waters with all of your folks, the constituents, that are going to say, hey, you shouldn't be using our water because we don't have much, and we're going to have to make a hard determination of, if we don't take some limited water from these that are already depleted to fight a fire, are we going to have a much larger landscape issue moving forward with that? And so those are things that I think are super important that we need to keep in mind, because we could make things a lot worse, not just from the drought, but by clearing off some large landscape watersheds that we didn't have enough water to fight because we were being really judicious about saving water in those areas. So that's just another thing there. Next slide. This is May. We're concerned. Everybody got a lot of people got moisture. I live in Alamosa. It snowed for about 4 minutes, and that was it. So there wasn't a lot everywhere. There was some in some places for sure. Next slide. And again, I pulled a ton of my stuff out because Russ really covered all the fire, the environment type stuff that is important on this. But I think that the things I wanted to touch on was, we are concerned that it's going to be a busy year. It has been busy up to this point. We are concerned about water sources when it comes to helicopters being out there. And it can all change in a week, and we can be going from fire season to flood season, but we're here to do whatever we need. But I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any, and thanks for the invite.
Thanks, Paul. Are there any questions from the group?
Yeah, I have one. Paul, thanks for that information. Where can the layperson find some of those charts that you're showing about the burn index?
Absolutely. So we have a actual dashboard that is a public facing dashboard that I will get the link sent over to Kat or Emily, so you guys can share it out with this group. But It's managed by our intelligence group, and it has tons of information. What we've done is we take all these different places, because it's really easy to get stuck in that looking for all these different websites and stuff. And for a fire perspective, it's all in one place, and you can click through and see all those different things.
That'd be great. Thanks so much, Paul.
Absolutely.
And Tracy, I see your hand up.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention something from the perspective of the agency, the Division of Water Resources that administers water use in Colorado. I definitely understand your concern about there being adequate physical water supplies this summer, but I do want to stress that to the extent the emergency community has concern about dipping into water supplies to fight an active emergency, it has always been something that we've been able to work out between people who own those water rights and the use of that water for fires. So I just want to stress that that shouldn't be a limitation on our fighting fires in an emergency. It's always something we have been able to work out with water users. So I hope that's just not a concern with our emergency managers.
No, absolutely, Tracy, and I appreciate that. And I feel like we've always had great conversations with folks from your shop to talk about not only getting to water, but making sure we're not getting water cross-contaminated from other things and different things like that. It's always been great. I have seen in a couple of the other states, Wyoming most recently, just put out a letter kind of just reaffirming that for so we can get to our fire folks. Hey, if there's an emergency, do the right thing, use the right resource, be judicious, don't use more than you need to. If there's multiple places, spread out the wealth when it comes to that. I think that's been really helpful, and we can provide that to our incident management teams. And so I was actually thinking about putting a draft together, getting it to Director Morgan, and seeing if we could move it through the system just to reaffirm that for our folks so that they understand the process.
Yeah, great. And if we can provide any support for that, we're happy to.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
And Paul, I just had a quick question. You spoke to the threat of soil moisture being, the ability of fire to go deeper into the soil. Could you speak to a little bit like what the actual impacts of that would be?
Sure. I think just thinking it from a very broad perspective, if there's not as much moisture in the soil, the tendency for a big log to sit there and burn is for that heat to transfer deeper into the soil. So then it could affect the root system of the vegetation that's around it and actually kill it. Where in a lot of instances, if we have decent soil moisture, that's dissipated a little bit better and you don't have this severity of a burn. You still may have the intensity, which is kind of above the ground, how big the flames are, how fast they're moving. But when I think about it, I think about severity going down into the soil and affecting the vegetation that way.
Thank you. All right. I don't see any other hands up. Oh, there you go, Robert.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a great question, Kat. I was wondering too, would it possibly increase the possibility of that soil becoming hydrophobic?
Absolutely. It has that is definitely one of the opportunities or things that happens when it happens. It can be moisture. It can have some soil moisture or not, but the longer it sits there and burns and kind of, solidifies everything, definitely becomes hydrophobic. And then it also, if you have dried out roots, that fire just has the ability to travel further and deeper along those root systems. And that's kind of so it's kind of all of those things happen at one time.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you so much. I don't see any other questions. So thanks, Paul. And in the interest of time, we'll probably move on to our agency report outs, starting with the Department of Natural Resources.
Great. Hey, everyone, I'm Dan Gibbs with the Department of Natural Resources. Thank you, Russ and Paul, for those presentations. Really interesting. I was busy taking screenshots of a lot of that data that you presented, so it was really, really well done. I know these meetings take a lot of work to put together, so just shout out to my whole team for participating, as well as all of you for participating, but a special shout out, Kat, to you, and I know Sam and Emily and Jenna, your whole team, working really hard to put this together. So just my appreciation to you. The DNR holds a unique challenge to balance the development and preservations of Colorado's natural resources. And it's become definitely more challenging in the face of the climate, the drought that we have, that we're learning more about. So definitely thankful for the new moisture that we received over the last few days. And I said, earlier, I wish Breckenridge and Summit County got a little bit more, but glad that some parts of the state, had well over 20 inches. I'm really looking forward to having some discussions about some of the subgroups. I remember vividly in 2020 when we developed the municipal and agriculture sub-working groups. I really thought that added a lot of really important information on how we shape our knowledge and also how we can come up with recommendations. And yeah, really glad to have Paul here from the Division of Fire Prevention and Control really help us, examine what the wildfire risks are. And I would love to make a recommendation too, like, in the future, just like we're doing all the agency updates, but include Division of Fire Prevention and Control in that mix as well, because they're just doing, tremendous work, but also help us to inform like the risks that we are seeing statewide. And then, thinking of DFPC, they did a really tremendous job last week organizing the annual governor's wildfire preparedness briefing. I had an opportunity to participate in that, and that's just really awesome when you see. I have the saying that wildfires don't know the difference between federal, state, and private or tribal lands, and we need to have a management strategy that's reflective of that. And these briefings are so incredible because there's so many different partners, like state and federal, and you had like county sheriffs there, and all the federal, partners too, all sharing, what they can bring to the table and inform the governor on what's going on. So I really thought that went, extremely well. And I'm always going to do my best to participate in these meetings. We're all, super busy people, and but this is definitely a big priority, and really look forward to continuing our conversations that we have together this morning. So thanks again.
Thanks so much, Dan. Next up is the Colorado Water Conservation Board.
Yeah, thanks, Kat. And for those that I haven't met, my name is Anna Moss. I'm the Deputy Director at the CWCB, and I'll just give an overview of a lot of the work that's happened since the last task force meeting last month. As Director Gibbs mentioned, our team has been hard at work trying to advance the objectives that came out of this group. That's all while still doing our regular work to try to help build drought resilience and all the things related to our mission. So some of the things that have happened is a new Drought Task Force web page that will be mentioned, I think, later in this presentation too, but it's really intended to serve as a hub for all the meeting materials. It'll have meeting summaries, any updates. There's some key drought resources, so it's a great site to go to for sure. Our team also worked hard behind the scenes just to organize this meeting, all the pre-communication, agenda building, all those things. And then also, Kat's team leads the Water Conditions Monitoring Committee meetings. So the last meeting was on April 21st, and saw record attendance. I think drought is of interest to everyone these days. And so the next meeting will be in mid-May. And as a reminder, what that committee does is it really monitors the conditions that affect Colorado's water supply. So they look at snowpack, reservoir storage, stream flow, historic climate norms, long-term precipitation and temperature outlooks, and climate variations. So the suite of things that go into this water supply planning. Kat also mentioned this earlier. Our team established a protocol for receiving and responding to public comments. So we handled the comment that came into the CWCB that was shared out. And then a lot of work went into these working group coordination efforts. You'll hear from all the working groups later in this agenda. But what Kat's team did was really look to identify existing work groups that are already addressing drought-related issues and things that are aligning with what this task force identified as priorities. And so I think that it was a recognition that there are a lot of staff capacity limits, but also a lot of folks meeting in these areas. And so in an effort to avoid redundancy and to tap into existing knowledge and existing work groups, really they just wanted to tap into those resources. So the team met with various stakeholders, existing groups, to understand what coordination efforts are already underway, what could help this task force, and really reinforce those communications and information sharing strategies. And I think I'll just close with just saying that, largely CWCB, we really focus on long-term planning and resiliency building. We recognize that water conservation and efficiency efforts are all connected to drought preparedness, but it's hard to respond to drought. So we kind of look at these things as a long-term plan for us. And so you'll also see this on the resources webpage, but we do offer funding opportunities to help build drought resilience. And so we're trying to continue that message and connecting that conservation work, efficiency work, and how that all ties into drought. So we'll keep working on our messaging there. And I guess just lastly, just closing that, we are always responsive to trying to be responsive to public engagement and providing updates. So our team will work, we've got a board meeting in the next couple of weeks. We'll share information out. We've got all of the roundtables. And so these are ways for us to share information out, but also collect feedback or concerns if there are things to elevate to you all. So I think that's it for CWCB updates. Thanks, Kat.
Thanks so much, Anna. Next up is Division of Water Resources.
Thanks, Kat. The Division of Water Resources, we're the state agency that administers the priority water rights system in Colorado. And so I just wanted to highlight some of the issues we're seeing related to the drought. First of all, ag water users, they're commonly going with very low water supplies this year because stream flows are so low. The only water users who are able to divert right now from streams are those with very senior water rights. And really, we're seeing unprecedented senior water right calls on the streams right now. For instance, in the Arkansas, we have a call at 1874. This is a senior call that we haven't seen since August of 2002. So 2002, many of us know, was a drought year. But this is even earlier, much earlier in the season than we saw the call at 1874 in the Arkansas then. On the Uncompahgre, which is in the Gunnison River Basin, we have another senior call again very early, one that we haven't seen again since later in the season in 2002, and that's really pretty similar across the state. For some of our water systems that are on an allocation basis with the number of water users, they're commonly at much less than their normal amounts. For example, we've got Central Water, which covers thousands of wells in the South Platte Basin. They're at 50% or less of their normal allocations. And so this means that primarily well users for irrigation in northeastern Colorado are going with a lot less water this year. Down in the Southwest Basin, we've got the Dolores Project, which relies on supplies out of McPhee Reservoir. I believe they're at 13% this year. So that's impacting systems like the Mountain Ute Farm and Ranch. They're fallowing a lot of their land this year. The Fryark Project, they supply water to irrigators and other users in southeast Colorado in the Arkansas River Basin. They are seeing a historically low yield. So we're seeing irrigators faced with very low water supplies this year. I would say that Colorado ag water users are used to preparing for drought and adjusting accordingly. They know that this is our system and that they have to adjust. That doesn't mean that they're not impacted, but they do adjust accordingly and work within the system. switching gears, we do have a concern this year that's more related to small water systems. These might be HOAs that rely on wells or small communities with small treated water systems. We're aware that there are a number across the state who are likely not going to have enough replacement water in their augmentation plans to replace their out of priority stream depletions. And this is just because we are seeing those unprecedented low stream flows. Normally, these aug plans need to provide a replacement source of water to senior water users. Their replacement supplies aren't going to yield the amount of water that they normally would, or even would in a normal dry year. And so their augmentation plans would essentially fail without adequate replacement supplies. For the ones that we're aware of, where we think the replacement supplies aren't going to yield enough water, we're going to go ahead and notify them, let them know that they need to find an additional source of replacement water for their augmentation plans. If they don't do that, they're likely to receive a cease and desist order from the Division of Water Resources because they're causing injury to other water users on the system. Ideally, the solution is for them to find an additional replacement supply and work with the Division of Water Resources to add that supply to their augmentation plan. But that's going to be a challenge. It's going to be costly for them because they'll likely have to purchase water. So we have a concern about those augmentation plans this year, and there's going to be a need to support some of these small communities and HOAs who are in this situation. And lastly, on the West Slope, a similar situation on the Colorado River. A lot of junior water users on the Colorado River in Colorado, they rely on replacement water in Green Mountain Reservoir. Green Mountain Reservoir is, again, has historically low storage because of our low snowpack this year. And so what water users normally rely on from Green Mountain is not available. And so there's a team who's been working together, the CWCB and JWR and the Colorado River District. They are seeking out, again, an alternative replacement source for those West Slope junior water users. So water can be put into the stream, keep senior water users whole, like those senior irrigators in the Grand Junction area. So that solution's in the works. But that's about it for me.
Thanks, Tracy, for all that really good information. Colorado Parks and Wildlife, you're up next. Oh, sorry, Robert. I didn't see your hand up.
Okay, thanks. I could have waited. Thanks, Kat. Tracy, I have a question. You know, when you're talking about like central Colorado, the augmentation plans that they have, could this actually also impact pumping next year? I mean, are some of those augmentation plans, you know, they won't have water to fill for obligations, even for pumping for farther into the future?
Yeah, thanks, Robert. I think that could be the case. Definitely, some of these augmentation plans rely on water that's been put in recharge months and years in advance, and that water slowly makes its way back to the stream system. So to the degree that water users haven't been able to put water into recharge due to the low stream flows, that's going to have an impact that stretches for months and years into the future.
Thanks for that question, Robert. And next up is Division of Parks and Wildlife.
Thanks, Kat. Good morning, everybody. Matt Nickel, I'm the Assistant Director for the Aquatics Branch. Director Clellan sends her regrets. As Dan mentioned, she's next door at our Parks and Wildlife Commission meeting. CPW continues to monitor drought situations across the state in terms of impacts to wildlife and their habitat, as well as recreational impacts for all of those, excuse me, who enjoy the outdoors. One recent example, I'm sure most of you saw in the news, was the draining of Antero Reservoir. Denver Water decided to avoid evaporative loss. They needed to move that water downstream to their other reservoirs. And so we authorized a public fish salvage beginning April 21st, where all bag and possession limits for fish were removed, and that'll be in place until May 13th, when Denver Water will close the gates at Antero. And it's an example of public salvages are a tool that we use during drought conditions that employ the public's help in harvesting and utilizing our fishery resources as much as possible. And it's a good example of how CPW can respond in real time to drought impacts while we're still making use of valuable resources. We're experiencing similar situations at other locations, of course, across the state, and other water owners are having to implement similar decisions. These situations impact not only anglers, but any of us that recreate in or around water. So we're encouraging any of those users to check our website for the latest information on fishing closures, boat ramp closures, and lake and reservoir access restrictions that don't necessarily happen at the boat ramps. So while CPW is continuing to monitor those recreational impacts, we're also closely monitoring ecological impacts as well. For example, the Upper Colorado River and San Juan River recovery programs are obviously concerned about these extreme conditions and potential long-term impacts to recovery efforts for endangered fish like Colorado pike minnow and the razorback sucker. Additionally, without strong spring flows, cobble bars and floodplains where those fish need to spawn have likely already been impacted. So CPW and our partners continue to monitor these critical fish and their habitat and have plans in place should additional action be necessary. We recently held our Partners in the Outdoor Conference in Colorado Springs, and we had over 260 organizations in attendance. And while it was a great meeting, nearly all of those partners had concerns about the drought situation and the impacts on their constituents and their communities. And so CPW is committed to continued good communication around drought conditions, impacts, and available resources as we try to navigate together with our partners. And I'll just close by saying that our teams are actively engaged and adapting quickly to changing conditions. The recent moisture, like everybody said, has been a welcome addition, but it's the proverbial drop in the bucket. And in some cases, too little, too late, as I mentioned, with the spawning of the endangered fish. However, even though we know there are many challenges ahead, we feel we're in a strong position to respond, and we'll continue coordinating closely with partners. I also want to recognize and thank the CPW staff across the state who are responding to these conditions with a great deal of grit and creativity. And I'll stop there. Thanks, Kat.
Thanks, Matt. Next up is Colorado Department of Agriculture.
Thanks, Kat, and thanks to you and your team for putting this all together, organizing it. I know it does take a lot of effort. We really appreciate all the hard work that you guys are doing. And also want to put my thanks to Russ and Paul. That was really interesting information, so I really appreciate that. At the Colorado Department of Ag, we held our what we're calling our Drought Cooperators meeting. The first meeting was on April 24th, and we just threw a wide net out there, cast a wide net. Anybody that could or are doing things with related to ag drought, we invited. We had 90 minutes. We had updates from the Colorado Ag Water Alliance, FSA, Colorado Water Center, CWCB was there. Thanks, Nora, for attending. Colorado River District, drought advisors from CSU, Division of Water Resources, and Sylvia Insurance, which is a crop insurance provider, having updates with them. I think we had 80 guests invited. We had about 45 attending. overall feedback was pretty positive. We just had a format where everybody just got 5 minutes. I had a countdown timer on there. Everybody appreciated the countdown timer. I guess it was the walk-off music if it went past 5 minutes. I didn't realize I was going to do that, but it was kind of fun. Mr. Rudolph at the Department of Ag has created what we're calling a drought cooperators resource page. I'll get that link to you guys. And we're just asking everybody to update us and keep us updated about what's going on, what resources they have, and any events that they're having as well. Is again, farmers and ranchers are busy this time of year. We don't want them to have to go to a ton of different meetings, but if we can cooperate in presenting material to them, I think that'll be a real benefit. And then we've also created our CDA's ag specific drought webpage. Again, the goal is to share information with farmers and ranchers, including emergency response, and finding ways to collaborate. Dan Frazen, our ag emergency coordinator, and his team just extended their emergency management comms student intern. They're trying to push out messages through social media and other means about preparation and fire mitigation. And we've also started fire prevention and fire safety trainings for all of our CDA staff. And I don't know if I've mentioned this before in the past, but I was interviewed about what farmers and ranchers are doing this year. And it's really, I told them on our farm, it's just a matter of survival this year. I think it's so important. Those investments that we made, those investments that CWCB that we did, to improve soil health, to water efficiencies, those are going to pay off now. So I think, and we're looking in the future, hopefully we can gauge how much impact those efforts are having, positive impacts those are having, and then a good reason why we should continue to invest in those areas into the future. So that's all for me. Thanks, Kat. Oh, one other thing. Dan, I'm in your neighborhood, actually. I'm in Silverthorne. I had a speaking engagement at Oak Creek and need to get to Rocky Ford for this evening. And I'll tell you, driving by Green Mountain, it is really scary. Like you said, they got minimal moisture yesterday, and Green Mountain is empty. So traveling across the West, it is really scary out there.
Yeah. Glad you're in my backyard. I wish we had more time to catch up.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thanks, Robert. Department of Local Affairs is up next.
Great. Hi, everyone. Marguerite Harden, Senior Resiliency Manager. There's two of me having connectivity issues this morning. Hopefully it works. I am sitting in for Ann Miller today, who's the director of the Colorado Resiliency Office, who regrets she's unable to make it, and she fills in for Maria DeCambra, our director at DOLA. Just our update, I want to first drop into the chat some of the DOLA drought resources that we did compile with our comms department and is now live and up on the web. We also hear from local governments and water providers about how they're continuing to proactively plan and implement water restrictions, whether that's voluntary or mandatory, and explore water resiliency planning. We did have some outreach come from Region 9 Economic Development District, which is in Southwest Colorado, who reached out to us to discuss some of the economic impacts of the drought conditions and explore coordinating proactive messaging, some planning, and support to communities. So some of the CRO team and Kat met with them on April 28th and will be invited to an upcoming Region 9 meeting. So one recommendation that we might have for the Drought Task Force to consider is to engage our Office of Economic Development and International Trade, or OEDIT, to explore coordinated messaging, planning, and support around drought and how it's impacting our economic conditions. And this could include the Colorado Tourism Office, or CTO, as they engage with outsiders who might not be as familiar with some of the drought conditions here in the state. That's the end of my report.
Thanks, Marguerite. That was great. And the last update is from the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management.
Good morning, Chris Sorensen, State Emergency Operations Center Manager, stepping in for Director Klein. He had a conflicting meeting. Just a few things of note. First, as I mentioned last time around, our field managers are staying coordinated with local emergency managers for any updates that they might have, any local declarations. Right now, I don't recall any new since our last meeting. That being said, though, we're also aware that Utah Governor Cox had mentioned the potential for a statewide drought declaration over there. So that may prompt a few things on the western slope, a little bit of follow on. So we'll pay attention on that as we go forward. Following last meeting, did meet with a few of the board members to talk about the executive order process, what that looks like and what it can include. That seemed to be very productive. If anybody else would like to know more about executive orders, just reach out. Happy to assist with that. One other item, not completely related to drought, but interesting for us. We've seen a number of small community water emergencies over the past month or 6 weeks. They aren't caused directly by drought water shortages, but one of the things that we are seeing out of that is the response to those is also spotting water leakage on those community water systems that can be corrected. So it's a small piece, but it can help mitigate draws on water supplies, something that we hadn't thought about, but it does give us the opportunity to at least assist in that capacity, as well as prepare ourselves for additional, from whatever cause, community water emergencies and plan for how we can support the residents of those communities. So pending any questions, that's the report from DHSEM.
Thanks, Chris. I'm glad you flagged that. I just wanted to make a quick plug for the Colorado Water Loss Initiative, which CWCB helps to facilitate, and it helps to identify system loss of water. So it's a great program, and I think it's something that probably we should chat a little bit more about. But thank you all for your updates. That was really helpful information. With that, I think we're running slightly behind on our schedule, and I'm going to turn it over to a quick report from our ad hoc work groups, and Emily Adrid, I believe, will be taking over.
Yep. Thank you, Kat, and thank you all for your report outs. For those of you who I have not met, my name is Emily Adrid, and I'm on the water supply planning team at the Colorado Water Conservation Board, and I'll guide us through our ad hoc work group discussion for the rest of our meeting today. Next slide, please. Just as a refresher, at the last Drought Task Force meeting, the task force members agreed to explore ad hoc work groups focused on municipal impacts, agricultural impacts, wildfire risk, and consolidating drought resources across the task force partner agencies. So first I'll start with some background. The ad hoc work groups, as they are right now, are a new feature of the 2023 Drought Response Plan, but they're inspired by past impact task forces in previous state drought plans. In the 2023 plan, the ad hoc work groups have been updated to be more flexible and responsive to different communities, sectors, and ecosystems affected by drought. There are no explicit guardrails on the duration or frequency of the ad hoc work groups. They are not time bound. The ad hoc work groups have the option to meet once if they'd like, or over a series of meetings, depending on their intended objectives and the intended information that's gathered. And there's no specifics on formality or structure, so the groups can vary based on what is most helpful. The drought plan does not explicitly outline who should participate in the work groups or the topics the group should focus on. And again, this flexibility is meant to be more responsive to the unique circumstances and impacts that may come with each drought. Generally, though, the goals of the ad hoc work groups are to provide a two-way communication channel between state and local partners and coordinate resource and information sharing, leveraging existing networks where possible. And I think that's an important point. We want to leverage our existing networks. And to avoid duplicative efforts and additional strain on staff, not only for the agencies of the Drought Task Force, but other agencies and our local partners in times of drought. We aim to identify, utilize, and again, leverage networks and work groups that may already exist to support information sharing between the Drought Task Force and our local partners. Next slide, please. So in the next few slides, we're going to walk through the ad hoc work groups. We're going to start with the Drought Resource Consolidation Group. Katie Weeman, CWCB's Marketing and Communications Director, will provide an update on behalf of the comms teams that she's been coordinating with. We'll talk about the municipal impacts, agricultural impacts, and wildfire risk work groups and work to date that has been done for each of them. And we'll talk about proposed paths forward for each of the groups. And when we discuss the proposed paths forward, that will be the time for the Drought Task Force members to have an opportunity to ask questions or weigh in on how to move each group forward. And I'll just also note that CWCB will create a living reference for the ad hoc work group schedules so that the Drought Task Force members or staff, if you're interested in attending, will kind of have that in a centralized place following the meeting. And just finally, to help inform these discussions, I think it'd be great to hear from Robert or CDA staff when we get to the agricultural impacts group, and also Director Gibbs on DNR's involvement in the wildfire preparedness plan when we get to the wildfire risk group discussion. So next slide, please. All right, so we're going to start with the Drought Resource Consolidation Group that was coordinated by CWCB and DNR. Katie Weeman will provide this update on behalf of the comms teams. So Katie, feel free to take it away.
Great, thanks, Emily. So for this working group, the goal was really to better connect Coloradans with available drought resources. So we brought together the communications leads from each of the partner agencies to coordinate this and then consolidate these resources in a way that people could find more easily. So across all of our positions, we've been, getting so many questions this year about, where do I go for information and what resources are available as we enter this record drought season. So the need was high for a central place for people to find and access the support that exists already. Excuse me. So over the past few weeks, this group has been connecting regularly and working across agencies to align our messaging and really identify the most useful resources for the public, for local governments, water users, and other stakeholders. So as a result of that, each partner agency has now developed a dedicated drought resource page. A few of them have been mentioned on this call already. So these are really highlighting the programs, funding opportunities, informational tools, and other support that's out there. And these pages are all now directly linked on the Drought Task Force landing page. The link is on this slide. And this is really aimed at creating a more centralized and accessible hub of information, which is an important step, I think, especially in a year like this. We're hearing that people are actively looking for clear information, and often the challenge is not really a lack of resources, but at knowing where to find them. So by bringing these resources together in one place, we're hoping it can help reduce some confusion and just improve access to finding and viewing all these things. So and then I just want to give a huge shout out to all my communications colleagues across the DNR and our partner agencies for all their work they did to develop these pages. It was a big collaborative effort, and everyone really jumped in quickly and built something that's, I think, really practical and meaningful for people this year. And then for moving forward, our group will continue collaborating throughout the drought season. We'll continue to build on this work, expand, and add to these pages as needed. And then just ensure that, as drought conditions evolve, our communications are evolving with it. So I think that's pretty much what I have. I'll turn it back to Emily.
Thank you so much, Katie. And maybe if you want to put that link in the chat, that would be great. Just in the interest of time, if there are any questions, it would be great if you could put them in the chat, and then Katie can, or CWCB staff can help answer. Thanks, Katie. Next slide. All right, so now we're going to move on to the municipal impacts group. We wanted to highlight this one because it's a really good example of how we can use existing networks to inform the Drought Task Force. So in April, the CWCB staff identified the Colorado Drought Coordination Group, which is a grassroots network made up of water providers and municipalities across the state. They meet monthly, and at their monthly meetings, all of the participating entities share updates on local drought conditions, the drought response measures that they're taking, including watering restrictions or communications initiatives, and they also coordinate on messaging for wise water use in times of drought. CWCB has attended these drought coordination meetings in the past and works in partnership with many of the participating water providers that attend those meetings. So for this work group, we are hoping to leverage the drought coordination group to help the Drought Task Force identify any risks or concerns or impacts of drought from municipal water providers, and also leverage or identify the actions and response measures that are being taken at the local level from municipal water providers. So for our path forward, CWCB staff is planning to attend these monthly meetings and report back to the task force with updates. And also we can message updates and priorities from the Drought Task Force to the Drought Coordination Group. So are there any questions or concerns about the overall direction of this work group or utilizing the Colorado Drought Coordination Group? Okay, well, hearing no questions, if there is anything that comes to mind that you, or specific information that you'd like to gather from municipal water providers, feel free to reach out to me or Jenna or Kat or Sam, and we can pass your question along to the Drought Coordination Group. Next slide, please. Oh, hey, Robert.
Emily,
Yep.
sorry,
No,
I'm working
no
on my
worries.
phone. It took me forever to try to find the button.
No worries.
Again, I'd love to know when those meetings are. Is it all right if somebody from CDA attends those meetings? Because as we've talked about so many times, ag users are leasing water from municipalities. So the drought impacts right now are they're pulling away some of that water. So it'd be good to be, I think, good to be a part of that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. We can provide that information to you following the meeting.
Great. Thank you.
Yep. Yep, Tracy.
Thanks, Emily. I just want to note that there might be a gap in terms of small communities and small towns who I think we would consider municipalities, but we've got towns who don't have dedicated water resources staff. People wear a lot of hats. And I think what we're seeing at DWR is that it's those small communities that are going to be struggling this year, maybe with their OG plans and maybe even with physical supply, and they might not, their problems are maybe not going to be reflected in the CDCG, and that might be fine. I just want to flag that as a gap that we might not be hearing from the really small communities that are going to have the biggest struggles this year through that group, and so I just want to elevate that is an issue that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, I appreciate you elevating that. And I think maybe we can do some coordination following the meeting to identify some of those smaller municipalities and potentially reach out to them. So thank you for bringing that up. All right, next slide. All right, so next we're going to talk about the Agricultural Impacts Group. Thank you, Robert, for mentioning the Colorado Ag Drought Cooperators meeting during your agency report out. And as we heard earlier, the CDA hosted the Ag Drought Cooperators meeting in April. CWCB was able to attend and provide an update about the Drought Task Force. For this work group, and I think this hopefully reflects what Robert had mentioned earlier, but we're hoping to establish that two-way communication channel between state and local ag partners to share drought updates, hear about relevant projects or drought events, because I know that there were a lot of events that were coming into my inbox, and I'm sure all of yours as well, related to drought. Also sharing about grant or funding opportunities and other requests for the group to kind of streamline and combine efforts where possible. So we are hoping to utilize the cooperators group to continue to share resources and information, and kind of use this as our impacts work group. And so Robert, feel free to jump in if you want to provide any additional context about this group and maybe who's on the meeting and kind of the outcomes or intended goals going forward.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. Yeah, we're happy to do that. I think your suggestion is great to be able to leverage what we're doing. I really just want to have input from the other task force members about, again, like what Tracy was just talking about municipal uses. Are we missing people? Who do we need to reach out to join this ag group? What would be useful for the task force overall that we get from the subgroup? And I think that's it. But we're happy to do that.
Great, that sounds good. And I think, from what I heard, the next meeting will be in May, and then we can continue to assess the frequency of meetings for that group. CDA will lead, and then CWCB is planning to support. So again, if there are any ideas or questions that come from Drought Task Force members about who we should be reaching out to for this group, feel free to just send us an email and let us know. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so finally, we will talk about the wildfire risk group. And I just want to start off by saying that because much of the work in the wildfire space happens at various scales and is advanced outside of the Drought Task Force, specifically thinking about the Division of Fire Prevention and Control, the CWCB has been kind of collaborating and learning how this work group can be most helpful and plug in to provide support in the wildfire space. So CWCB began by reaching out to DHSCM, who then connected us to the Division of Fire Prevention and Control. And CWCB staff had a conversation with them and discussed how the Drought Task Force can add value to the wildfire space. And kind of the area where the Drought Task Force agencies may be best suited to work is in coordinating unified messaging on the connection between water resources, drought, and wildfire. We also know that the 2026 Wildfire Preparedness Plan was released by the Governor's Office and the Division of Fire Prevention and Control last week, like Director Gibbs had mentioned. And the DNR was involved in the development of that plan. So Director Gibbs, I know you touched on this earlier, but I'd just like to give you another opportunity if you'd like to kind of elaborate on this plan and kind of the wildfire work being done as well.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. And I'll just add, as I mentioned earlier, last week I attended the Governor's annual wildfire briefing. The Division of Fire Prevention Control is really the lead on coordinating all that, but it was really amazing to have all the different partners that have something to do in the wildfire space or fire mitigation space there to kind of share who can bring what to the table. So we had, Kevin Klein was there, Stan Hilke from public safety, Mike Morgan, of course, with Division of Fire Prevention Control, Matt McCombs, our state forester, fire chiefs were involved, and U.S. Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, the National Guard was also there. And so it was a great showcase of how we all work together and collaborate. And I think Colorado does it really well when you look at how we just work together so well. And, I know the governor has already declared disaster emergencies for a few different fires in Colorado, in particular down in the Los Animas County area. And he has proclaimed May as Wildfire Awareness Month, which we're all working to kind of build awareness on what all Coloradans should be aware of it. So I just think a wildfire risk work group would add great value, especially we add the horsepower division of fire prevention and control in that mix, and all the great work that they do. I'm excited to participate in that, and have really I would probably recommend they should really take the lead of that, because they are the lead state agency on fires in Colorado.
Great. Thank you so much for that context and background, Director Gibbs. I think with that, given that the Division of Fire Prevention is kind of leading in the wildfire preparedness space, I think that it's a great suggestion, Director Gibbs, that they should help lead this group. Are there any questions or concerns about kind of the goal of this group to be more around coordinating communications to elevate that connection between water, drought, and wildfire? Right. Well, hearing none, I think that's where we can move forward with this group. And I listed here other possible agencies to be involved, Division of Fire Prevention, but also Colorado State Forest Service. So we will continue that coordination of these groups. I think we can move on to next steps. Okay. Great. Thank you, Jenna and Sam, for doing some back-end work and including these next steps from our discussion today. So based off of today's discussion, we've outlined next steps going forward. Specifically, we're interested in including the Division of Fire Prevention and Control updates in future meetings and sharing their resources. CDA will share the Drought Cooperators resource page. Thank you, Marguerite, for the suggestion to coordinate communications related to economic impacts of drought. CWCB will create a living document with the ad hoc work group meeting information and schedules for those who are interested in attending. We'll continue to identify smaller municipalities to bring into the Drought Cooperators group with the Division of Water Resources. The resources and communication group that Katie leads will continue to gather relevant press releases so that they're all in one centralized location. And we will stay connected with the Division of Fire Prevention and Control in the wildfire space. So thank you all so much for all of these great suggestions and participating in today's discussion. I think the last few things on this slide, the next Water Conditions Monitoring Committee will be on May 19th. Join that to hear a more in-depth update from Russ Schumacher and also our partners at NRCS. A summary of this meeting will be posted on the CWCB Drought Task Force website that Katie put in the chat. And then our next meeting will be on June 1st. And we're hoping for that to be a hybrid meeting to have the chance to meet in person if possible. So look out for more details about our next meeting. And with that, we can go to the next slide. And okay, that's our thank you slide. So thank you so much for all of your time and attention today, for the great discussion, and your report outs and just participating in this group. We look forward to seeing you all next time.